My mother called me crying at midnight, saying she needed me to come home immediately. But when I walked through that front door at 2 a.m., I realized she hadn't called me home because she needed her daughter. She called me home because she needed a witness to disappear. I want to tell you something about midnight phone calls. When you work in an ER, when you have spent years being the person other people call when everything is falling apart, you develop a relationship with urgency that most people never have to understand. You stop panicking, you assess, you move. So when my phone lit up at 12:04 a.m., and I saw my mother's name and I heard the particular sound she was making on the other end, that specific high, tight crying that lives at the back of the throat, I did not panic, I assessed. I moved. I was in my car in 4 minutes, and I drove 40 minutes in the dark to my mother's house, telling myself she was fine. It was fine. Whatever it was, we would handle it, because that is what I do. That is what I have always done. What I did not do, what it never once occurred to me to do, was ask myself why, if she was that upset, her voice had no shaking in it. Crying without shaking. I know what that is now. That is practiced. My name is Renee Colton. I am 38 years old. I have been an ER nurse for 11 years, which means I have held the hands of strangers at the worst moments of their lives more times than I can count. And I have driven home afterward and eaten cereal over the sink and gone to sleep and done it again the next day. I am not by nature a dramatic person. I like quiet, I like order, I like things that make sense. My life, right up until 12:04 on a Tuesday night, made sense. I had an apartment I loved, 12 minutes from the hospital. I had a job I was good at. I had a fiancé named Marcus who was stable and warm and who remembered small things. The way I took my coffee, the name of my difficult coworker, the fact that I hated overhead lighting and needed lamps. We had been together 2 years, engaged for 8 months. The wedding was in 5. My life made sense. I need to tell you about my mother before I tell you what I found. Because my mother, Patricia Colton, 61 years old, retired dental office manager, owner of 3 houseplants she has kept alive for a decade through what I can only describe as sheer stubbornness, is not a simple woman. She is not a villain. I want to say that clearly because this story is complicated and I am trying to tell it honestly, and the honest version does not have clean villains. But she is also not an easy woman. She has a gift, and I mean that in the most complicated possible sense of the word, for making her needs feel like emergencies, for calling at the wrong time and somehow making you feel that the wrongness of the timing is your fault for having a time that could be wrong, for building a situation around herself so quietly and so completely that by the time you notice you're inside it, leaving feels like abandonment. I grew up driving 40 minutes in the dark, not always literally, but always in spirit. My father left when I was 12. No dramatic exit, no final fight I can point to. He was there on a Tuesday and gone by Thursday. And my mother sat at the kitchen table for 3 days and then stood up and became someone slightly harder and slightly more vigilant and never fully explained any of it to me. I stopped asking eventually. You learn, as the child of a parent who carries secrets, that some doors are not for you. She remarried when I was 16. A man named Gary, steady, quiet, the kind of man who fixed things around the house on weekends and never raised his voice. He had a daughter from his first marriage, Tara. Tara was 7 when they married. She became my stepsister by law and my mother's favorite, by something that was never named out loud, but was always completely understood. Gary left too. When Tara was 14, me 22. Different reasons, same result. My mother at the kitchen table, slightly harder, slightly more vigilant. I stopped being surprised. Tara, to her credit, did not handle it the way I expected. She was angry at her father in the uncomplicated open way that younger children sometimes manage when older children have already used up all the complicated quiet. She yelled. She cried publicly. She moved in with her mom's sister for a year. She came back. We have never been close. Not unfriendly, not hostile, just parallel. 2 women who share a mother by paperwork and not much else. Or so I thought. I pulled into my mother's driveway at 1:58 a.m. The porch light was on. It is always on when she is expecting someone, which she will tell you is about safety, and which I have always understood is about something else. The particular comfort of a lit window, of visible waiting, of making sure you know she knew you were coming. I knocked once and opened the door because I have never needed to wait for my mother to let me in, and I was not waiting at 2 a.m. She was at the kitchen table, composed, both hands around a mug. A second mug across from her, steam still rising. She had made 2 cups before I arrived, which meant she had known, had been certain that I would come, that I would drive 40 minutes in the dark on a Tuesday night without asking too many questions because that is what Renee does. That is what Renee has always done. I stood in the doorway and I looked at my mother's dry eyes and the 2 prepared cups of tea, and I felt the first small shift, barely perceptible, like the ground settling, of something I could not yet name. "Sit down, baby," she said. I sat down. She did not speak immediately. She wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at the table and did the thing she does when she is organizing herself. 3 slow blinks like a camera adjusting focus. Then she reached to the side and picked up a manila folder that had been sitting on the chair next to her. She placed it between the 2 mugs. She did not open it. She just left it there, between us, like a question she was waiting for me to ask. "What is that?" I said. "Open it." Her voice was careful. Not cold, careful, the way you are careful with something fragile. I looked at the folder. Brown, plain, the kind you buy in bulk from an office supply store. My name was not on it, nothing was on it. I reached out and opened it. I am going to tell you what was inside, but I need you to understand the order in which I processed it, because the order matters, because the order is the difference between information and devastation. The first thing I saw was a photograph, printed on regular paper, slightly pixelated, the way photos look when someone screenshots them from a phone and then prints them in a hurry. It showed the exterior of an apartment building. Brick, mid-rise, the kind of building that exists in the middle of every American city and means nothing by itself. I did not recognize it. I looked up at my mother. "Keep going," she said quietly. The second thing was a lease agreement. I recognized the format. I had signed one myself 3 years ago. 2-bedroom apartment, month to month. The address matched the building in the photograph. I scanned to the name on the lease. Marcus Allen Webb, my fiancé's full name, which I had only learned when we got engaged and filled out paperwork together, which he had laughed about. Very official, huh? Full government name. And I had laughed too. I stared at his name on a lease for an apartment I had never heard of, never seen, never been told existed. The third thing was a bank statement. 14 months of payments. Rent, utilities, groceries, a full life, running parallel to ours, funded from an account I had never seen. The fourth thing was a photograph of a woman, standing outside the same brick building, laughing at something off camera, her hand raised slightly, and on her finger, catching the light just enough to be unmistakable. A ring. Not an engagement ring. Something older, more settled, the kind of ring a person wears for years. I closed the folder. I put both hands flat on the kitchen table. The tea in front of me had stopped steaming. My mother was watching me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not the vigilant hardness, not the managed calm. Something underneath those things. Something that looked, if I am being honest, like guilt. "How long have you had this?" I asked. She looked at her mug. 3 weeks, she said. 3 weeks. I had spoken to my mother 4 times in 3 weeks. I had told her about the venue deposit Marcus and I had just put down. I had told her I found a dress I loved. I had told her on Sunday that I was finally starting to feel like the wedding was real. She had said, "That's wonderful, baby," and asked about the centerpieces. 3 weeks. "Who gave this to you?" I asked. My mother's hands tightened around her mug. "Tara," she said. I sat in my mother's kitchen until 4 a.m. I did not cry. I want to be honest about that. Not because I was strong, but because I was so far inside the shock that tears felt like they belonged to a version of this moment I hadn't reached yet. I just sat, and I thought about Marcus asleep in my apartment right now. His breathing, the way he slept on his side, the small ordinary fact of him. And I thought about a brick building I had never seen with his name on a lease, and a woman with a settled ring laughing at something off camera. And I thought about Tara, who had known for 3 weeks, who had not called me, who had gone to my mother instead of me. Why? I drove home as the sun came up. Marcus was still asleep. I stood in the bedroom doorway and watched him breathe for a long moment. Then I went to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub and called Tara. It rang 4 times. She picked up. "Renee, why did you go to Mom?" I said. "Why didn't you come to me?" Silence. And then Tara said something that I was not prepared for. Something that made me stand up slowly from the edge of the tub and walk to the window. "Because," she said quietly, "I wasn't sure you'd believe me, and I needed someone who knew him. Someone who'd met him before you did." I went very still. "What do you mean before I did?" Another silence. Longer this time. "Renee, there's something about Marcus that isn't in that folder. Something Mom doesn't know either. And I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for 3 weeks because I genuinely don't know how you're going to take it." "Tell me," I said. "Not on the phone," she said. "I'm coming over. Don't talk to Marcus yet. Please." She hung up. I stood at my bathroom window watching the early morning light hit the parking lot below. Marcus was still asleep in my bed, and I was already somewhere else entirely. Tara arrived at 6:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I was watching the parking lot from my window, and I noted it the way I note things at work. Automatically, precisely. The way your brain itemizes details when it understands that details are about to matter. She had not slept. I could tell from the bottom of the stairs before she even reached my door, the particular flatness of someone who has been awake with something heavy for a long time. She was in yesterday's clothes. Her hair was pulled back in the fast, careless way you pull your hair back when appearance has stopped being a consideration. She knocked softly. I opened the door before she finished. We stood in the doorway and looked at each other. Tara and I are not a hugging relationship. We are a side-by-side relationship. The kind built from years of existing in the same spaces without fully choosing each other, which creates its own particular bond that is harder to name but surprisingly durable. She looked at my face and I looked at hers, and something passed between us that didn't need words. I stepped back and let her in. Marcus was still asleep. I had checked twice. His breathing was even and oblivious, and I had stood in the bedroom doorway both times looking at him and feeling something I could not fully identify. Not yet anger, not yet grief, something earlier than both of those. Something that felt like standing at the edge of a very high place and not yet having jumped. I had made coffee, 2 cups, and I noticed when I set them on the counter that I was doing exactly what my mother had done. Preparing, waiting. Like mother, like daughter, I thought. And then I stopped thinking about that because it led somewhere I wasn't ready to go yet. Tara sat at my kitchen counter and wrapped both hands around her mug and stared into it for a moment. "I need to start from the beginning," she said. "And I need you to let me finish before you say anything." "Okay," I said. "I mean it, Renee. The whole thing before you react. Because the way it sounds in the middle is not how it sounds at the end." "Okay, Tara." She looked up, took a breath, and started. 8 weeks ago, Tara had been at a work lunch downtown. She manages a small marketing firm out of a co-working space on 5th, the kind of place with a lot of glass walls and exposed brick and people eating salads at standing desks. The restaurant was 2 blocks away. She went alone, which she often did, liked the hour of quiet in the middle of a loud day. She was seated by the window, and she saw Marcus. He was at a table across the restaurant, not hidden, not tucked away, just sitting there in the open the way people sit when they have nothing to hide, which she would later understand was its own kind of audacity. He was with a woman. Tara recognized her from a photo I had apparently shown her months ago. Not a photo I remembered showing her, but Tara has a specific memory for faces, always has. It was the woman from the folder, the one with the ring. Tara had taken a photo on her phone. Casually, she said, the way you photograph something you're not sure what to do with yet, just to have it, just in case. She sat with her salad and she watched them for 20 minutes. And then the woman leaned across the table and said something, and Marcus laughed. That easy, uncomplicated laugh that I knew, that I would know anywhere. And he reached across and covered her hand with his. Not the gesture of a man with something to hide. The gesture of a man completely at home. "I drove around for an hour after," Tara said. "I didn't know what to do. I almost called you 4 times. "Why didn't you?" She looked at her coffee. "Because I only had 1 photo of 2 people having lunch." "That's nothing. You would have had an explanation, or Marcus would have, and I would have looked like I was causing problems." She paused. "I have a history of looking like I'm causing problems." She said it plainly without self-pity, and it landed somewhere quiet in my chest because she was right. In our family's story, Tara had always been the one who made things complicated. The one who was too loud, too emotional, too much. I had never questioned that narrative because I was too busy being the one who was none of those things. I was starting to wonder how much of that narrative we had both just accepted without examining. "Okay," I said. "So you needed more." "I needed more," she confirmed. So I went back. She had gone back to the restaurant the following week. Same day, same time, and a hunch, and it paid off. They were there again. Same table, same ease. This time Tara got the woman's face clearly. Ran it through every social platform she could think of with the methodical persistence of someone who has decided they are going to find something. She found her. Jennifer Hartley, 34, yoga instructor, based in the same city. And on Jennifer Hartley's Instagram, public, unhidden, lived in, was a life. A full ongoing documented life. Apartment check-ins. Restaurant photos. A dog. Weekend trips. And Marcus. Not everywhere. Not obviously, but present in the edges. A hand in a background photo, a tagged location that matched one he'd told me he'd been at for work, a comment on one of her posts from 8 months ago that said simply, from an account Tara cross-referenced to a secondary Instagram I had never seen. The lease was the last thing she found. A contact at a property management company. She would not tell me how she knew them, and I decided not to push. Confirmed the name on the unit. Marcus Allen Webb, 14 months. I listened to all of it without speaking. I had promised her I would, and I kept the promise. Though there were moments, specific moments, like when she said 14 months, when keeping it required something physical, a conscious act of stillness. When she finished, the apartment was quiet. From the bedroom, I could hear Marcus shift in his sleep, the small sound of the mattress. The ordinary sound of a man sleeping peacefully in someone else's life. "There's one more thing," Tara said. Her voice had changed. The careful, measured pace of the story she'd been telling, that was gone. What replaced it was something smaller and less certain. "When I found Jennifer's Instagram," she said, "I went through it pretty thoroughly, looking for anything else. Any other details? And there was a photo from about 6 months ago. They were at some kind of event, Looked like a fundraiser or a work thing. Formal. She posted it with a bunch of other people tagged. She pulled out her phone, opened it to a screenshot, slid it across the counter. I looked at it. A group photo. 8 people, formally dressed, smiling at the camera. Jennifer on the left. Marcus 3 people to her right. And between them, slightly out of focus, standing with his arm around a woman I didn't recognize, a man. Older, silver-haired. The kind of face that had once been very handsome and had aged in a way that kept some of that. I stared at that face. My coffee went cold. Renee, Tara said quietly. I know, I said. And I did. I knew that face the way you know a face you have tried very hard to forget and never fully managed to. I had not seen it in 26 years, but I knew it. That's your dad, Tara said. Not a question. Yes, I said. He's in the photo with Marcus. I can see that. They look like they know each other. I can see that too. My voice was coming from somewhere very far away. I was aware of my hands on the counter and the sound of traffic outside and the coffee going cold and Marcus shifting in the bedroom, and all of it felt suddenly like a stage set. Everything slightly too arranged, too deliberate, too constructed. Renee, Tara's voice was careful. How did you meet Marcus? I looked up from the photo. Mutual friend, I said. A party 2 years ago. What mutual friend? I opened my mouth and stopped because I was reaching for the name of the mutual friend who had introduced us, who had pulled me over at that party and said, you have to meet this guy. And I was reaching and reaching, and I could see the party, could see the room, could see Marcus turning and smiling. But the name of the person who had introduced us. I could not find it. I sat in my kitchen after Tara left, and I made myself go back to that party in my memory, the way I go back to a difficult case. Slowly, without rushing, looking at every detail. I remembered the venue. I remembered what I was wearing. I remembered the moment I saw Marcus and the way he'd looked at me like I was someone worth looking at. What I could not remember, no matter how hard I reached, was who had brought me to that party, or who had made sure Marcus was there. I picked up my phone. I scrolled back through my messages to 2 years ago, and I found the invitation. It had come via text, a number I had not saved. I had never saved it because I had met Marcus that night and everything else about the evening had become irrelevant. I looked at the number for a long time. Then I did something I had not done in 26 years. I typed a single word and hit send. Dad? The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, like he had been waiting. He responded in 40 seconds. I know because I was watching the screen with the focused, slightly unreal attention of someone whose body has decided this moment matters before their brain has fully caught up. Renee, just my name, nothing else. Not oh my god or is that really you or I've been hoping you'd call. Just my name. Typed back at me like a period at the end of a sentence that had been waiting 26 years to be finished. I stared at it, and I felt not what I expected to feel. Not the old buried anger which I had always assumed was sitting right there under the surface, ready. Not grief, not relief. I felt tired. The particular exhaustion of someone who has been holding a door closed for a very long time and has just been told that what's on the other side is not what they thought. I did not respond right away. I put my phone face down on the counter and I went to the bathroom and I stood at the sink and ran cold water over my wrists. Something I do when I need to come back into my body, an ER trick, grounding. And I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I looked like my mother. I have always looked like my mother, and it has always been. Depending on the day, either a comfort or an irritation. That morning it was neither. That morning it was just a fact. The particular fact of being a woman made partly from a person you understand and partly from a person you don't. I thought about Marcus asleep in my bed. I thought about the party 2 years ago and the invitation I couldn't place. I thought about the 3 dots that had appeared in 40 seconds, which meant he had a phone and a signal and had seen my message instantly, which meant he was awake at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday, which meant he had a life that ran on a schedule, which meant he had been living a life this whole time. Obviously, he had been living a life. That is what people do when they leave. They go somewhere and they live. I had just never fully let that be real before. Marcus came out of the bedroom at 7:15. He was in his usual morning state, unhurried, slightly rumpled, the easy comfort of a man who feels safe in a space. He came into the kitchen and went directly to the coffee maker and said, without looking at me, "Morning, babe. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said. "How's your mom?" I looked at the back of his head. "Fine," I said. "She just needed some company." He turned with his coffee and leaned against the counter and smiled at me. The full, easy smile, the one I had loved, the one that had felt like being chosen. And I smiled back. I am a good nurse. I have held my face still through things most people never encounter. I held it still now. "You want breakfast?" he said. "I'm okay," I said. "Go ahead." He made eggs. He offered me some twice. He talked about a work meeting. He kissed me on the cheek before he left and said, "Love you" at the door, and I said it back. I said it back. And I stood in my kitchen listening to his car back out of the lot, and I thought, not for the first time in the last 5 hours, but for the first time with any clarity, who are you? I picked up my phone. I typed to my father, I need to ask you something about a party. 2 years ago. The 3 dots again. Immediate. I know. 2 words. I know. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not dramatically, not collapsing, just needing to be lower, closer to the ground, the way you sometimes need when the ceiling feels like it's moving. I typed, did you introduce me to Marcus? A longer pause this time. 15 seconds, 20. Then, can we talk? Not text. I owe you more than a text. I almost said no. I had said no. In every version of this conversation I had rehearsed in my head over 26 years, I had said no. I had been cool and unreachable and sufficiently unbothered to make it clear that his absence had not made me smaller. I typed, tonight, 7 p.m., the coffee place on Mercer. You're buying. He responded instantly. I'll be there. I called Deb. Deb is my work best friend. 12 years. The kind of friendship forged in ER corridors at 3 a.m. Over bad vending machine coffee and the specific bond of having seen things together that you don't talk about at dinner parties. She is the most grounded person I know. She does not catastrophize. She does not perform emotion. She listens the way good nurses listen, completely, without filling the silence. I told her everything. All of it, start to finish. The midnight call, the folder, Tara, the photo, my father's name on my screen after 26 years. When I finished, there was a pause and then she said, where are you right now? Kitchen floor, I said. Okay, that's fine. Kitchen floor is fine. A beat. Are you safe? Yes. Is Marcus there? No, he left for work. Good. Another beat. Renee, I need you to hear me. I'm listening. You are going to get up off that floor. You are going to shower and eat something real and go to your meeting with your father tonight. And you are not going to do anything about Marcus until you know the full shape of this. Because right now you have pieces and pieces are dangerous. You need the whole picture. I know, I said. Do you? Yes, Deb. Good. Call me after your father. She hung up. I sat on the kitchen floor for 4 more minutes. Then I got up. My father was already there when I arrived. He was at a corner table, the farthest from the door, the least visible from the street, and I noticed that choice and filed it away. He had chosen somewhere to be unseen. Old habit, maybe. Or deliberate. He stood when he saw me. He was older than the last time I had seen him. Obviously, I had last seen him at 12. He was now 63. And the math of that lived in his face. The silver hair I had seen in Tara's photo. Lines that hadn't been there. The particular gravity of a person who has been carrying something for a long time. We stood across the table from each other for a moment. I did not hug him. He did not reach for me. We sat down. You look like your mother, he said. I know, I said. Talk. He talked. It came out in a shape I had not expected. Not clean, not rehearsed, not the organized confession of someone who had been preparing their defense. It came out the way true things come out, when someone has been holding them for a long time and finally puts them down, unevenly, with gaps, with the particular exhaustion of a person who is relieved and ashamed in equal measure. He had been back in the city for 4 years. He had not reached out because, and he said this carefully, watching my face, he had not known if I wanted him to. He had made assumptions about what I wanted based on what he felt he deserved, which he admitted was a coward's way of making a decision. He had seen me once from a distance on a street 2.5 years ago. I had been with Marcus. He had recognized Marcus. How, I said flat. Not a question exactly. A demand. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. I met Marcus through a business acquaintance about 3 years ago, before you were together. He is in investment. We had some mutual dealings. Nothing significant. I didn't know him well. But you knew him? I knew of him. He paused. And I knew his reputation. Something moved in my chest. Cold and specific. What reputation? My father looked at the table. Marcus has a pattern, he said. It was known in certain circles. He finds women who are financially stable, self-sufficient. He builds something real with them. I want to be clear. I think what he feels is probably genuine on some level. But he also maintains a parallel situation. He has done this before. More than once. And you knew this, I said, when you saw me with him on that street? Yes. And I didn't do anything. He said it before I finished. Like he needed to say it first. I told myself it wasn't my place. That you didn't want to hear from me. That you were an adult who could make her own choices. I told myself a lot of things. For 2.5 years. Yes. The coffee shop was warm and normal around us. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary morning, people with ordinary lives having ordinary coffee. And I sat across from my father, and I thought about 2.5 years of him knowing and saying nothing. The party, I said. He closed his eyes briefly. The party was not. I did not arrange that. I want to be clear. I did not put you in Marcus's path deliberately. But when I found out afterward that you had met him there, that you were together, I convinced myself it was fine. That maybe I was wrong about him. That maybe with you it would be different. You convinced yourself, I said, because the alternative was telling me. And telling me meant calling me. And calling me meant facing you, he said quietly. Yes. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a car drove past. Someone laughed at the counter. The world continued being ordinary. I wrote you a letter, my father said, 6 months ago, when I heard, through the same business circles, that he'd proposed to you. I wrote it and I didn't send it. Why? Because I was afraid. Of what? He looked at me, really looked at me, the way he hadn't yet, the way I think he'd been building toward since I walked in. Of exactly this, he said. Of sitting across from you and seeing your face and knowing that every year I waited made it worse and knowing I waited anyway. I looked back at him, and I felt complicated things. Things I had no interest in performing for him or simplifying for myself. Anger that was real and grief that was real, and underneath both of them, quieter and more inconvenient, the 12-year-old who had stood at a window on a Thursday and watched a car leave and never come back. She was still there. She was just not going to run the meeting. I need the letter, I said. He reached into his jacket pocket. He had brought it. I drove home with the letter on the passenger seat. Unopened. Marcus was home, his car in the lot, lights on upstairs, the ordinary evidence of a man living comfortably in a life built on someone else's foundation. I sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes. I thought about what Deb had said. You need the whole picture. I had it now. Every piece. I thought about the venue deposit Marcus and I had put down 3 weeks ago. The one my mother had listened to me describe while sitting on a folder for 3 weeks. I thought about the guest list his mother had been building, enthusiastically, elaborately, with the particular investment of a woman who believed this wedding was happening. And I thought about my job, 11 years of ER nursing, 11 years of walking into chaos and finding the still point inside it, 11 years of knowing that the most important thing, the thing that determined every outcome, was not the reaction. It was the next decision. I picked up my phone. I called Deb. I have the whole picture, I said. Good, she said. What do you need? I need Saturday, I said. And I need you to trust me. A pause. Always, she said. I want to tell you what I did on Thursday and Friday before I tell you about Saturday. Because Saturday only makes sense if you understand the 2 days before it. The quiet, deliberate, completely ordinary-looking 2 days in which I made every decision that mattered. Thursday I went to work. Full shift, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Trauma bay, waiting room, the relentless, ordinary emergencies of a mid-sized city on a weekday. I was good at my job. I am always good at my job, even on the days when my personal life is falling apart, which is either a strength or a coping mechanism, and I have stopped trying to determine which. I came home and Marcus made dinner and we ate and talked, and I was present and warm and completely myself. He had no idea. I want to be clear about something. I did not perform happiness. I did not pretend everything was fine in a theatrical way. I was simply still. The same stillness I find in the middle of a trauma. The stillness that is not absence of feeling but control of it. After dinner, I called Tara. Saturday, I said. What time? 7. My place. Should I bring Mom? I thought about it. Yes, I said, but tell her to let me run it. A pause. Tara knowing what that meant. Telling our mother to let someone else run something was not a small request. I'll tell her, Tara said. She'll listen. How do you know? Because she's been waiting, Tara said simply. She called me home for 3 weeks to do something about this, and then didn't know what to do. She wants someone to take the wheel. I thought about 2 cups of tea on a kitchen table. Okay, I said. Friday I called a lawyer. Not a dramatic call. Not a call I had to work up to. Just a practical, necessary call. The same way I would call a specialist for a patient. I explained the situation to a woman named Janet Reeves, who had been recommended by a colleague who had gone through her own version of this 2 years ago. Janet listened without interrupting and then asked 4 specific questions and then said, "You're in a good position. Nothing is jointly owned?" "Nothing," I said. "The apartment is mine. The accounts are separate. We have not combined finances." Good. That was either very wise or very lucky. A little of both, I said. What do you want the outcome to be? I thought about it. I want him out of my apartment and out of my life with no debris, I said. I don't want a scene. I don't want a long process. I want it clean. That's achievable, she said. Call me after the weekend. Saturday, I read my father's letter. I had been carrying it for 3 days. In my bag, always present, never opened. On Saturday morning, alone in the apartment while Marcus was at the gym, I made coffee and I sat at my kitchen table and I opened it. I am not going to tell you everything it said. Some things belong to me and to the 12-year-old who stood at a window on a Thursday, and they don't need an audience. What I will tell you is this. It was honest, painfully, specifically, accountably honest in the way that people sometimes manage when they have been living with something long enough that the weight of it finally exceeds the cost of putting it down. He did not make excuses. He made explanations. There is a difference, and he knew the difference, which surprised me. He described the years, the distance he had built and then not known how to cross. The moment he saw me on the street with Marcus and the choice he made and the precise, quiet self-knowledge of a man who understood he had made it wrong. He said he did not expect forgiveness. He said he was not writing for forgiveness. He said he was writing because I deserved to know that someone who should have been watching out for me had not been, and that the failure of that was not mine to carry. I folded the letter. I put it in the drawer of my nightstand. I did not call him. Not yet. But I kept it. That felt like enough for now. Marcus came home from the gym at noon. He was in a good mood. The easy, uncomplicated good mood of a man with no idea what the day held. He showered and made himself lunch and sat on the couch and asked if I wanted to watch something. Actually, I said, I've got some people coming over tonight. He looked up. Yeah? Who? My mom, Tara. Oh, nice, he said easily. Girl stuff? You want me to make myself scarce? I looked at him. No, I said, I'd like you to be here. They arrived at 7. Tara first. She came in quietly, no performance, and stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at me. And I looked at her and we did the side-by-side thing, the thing we'd always done, and it felt different now. Less parallel, more together. My mother 5 minutes later. She came in and hugged me, a real one, not the managed kind, and said nothing, which was the most useful thing she could have done. Deb at 7:15 with a folder under her arm. Marcus looked at the folder, just once. A quick reflexive look. The look of someone who recognizes, on some animal level, the shape of a thing that concerns them. I saw it. I filed it away. We all sat down. I had thought about how to do this. I am, by training and by nature, a person who leads with facts, with sequence, with the specific clarity of information presented in the order that makes it most comprehensible. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not give a speech. I simply had talked. I told Marcus what I knew. The folder, the apartment, Jennifer, the lease, the 14 months, the bank account. I presented each piece the way I present a patient chart. Here is the data. Here is what it indicates. Here is what it means. Marcus was very still. He did the thing, I had expected it, where he opened his mouth to explain, to contextualize, to begin the long, careful work of reframing. He was good at reframing. He had been doing it for 2 years without me noticing. I held up one hand. I'm not finished, I said. He closed his mouth. I told him about the photo, the fundraiser, the man standing 3 people away from Jennifer. I told him I had spoken to that man. Marcus's stillness changed quality. It went from managed to something else, something more fundamental. The stillness of a person who has just understood that the ground they were standing on has a different map than they thought. His name is Renee Colton, I said. He's my father. The room was quiet. He told me about your reputation, I said. About the pattern. About the other women. Marcus looked at his hands. I want you to know something, I said. I don't think you're a monster. I think you are a person who found a way to get what you needed from people who trusted you. And I think you told yourself enough of a story about it that you could live with it. I think some of what you felt with me was real. I think that's actually the saddest part. He looked up. His eyes were wet. And I felt not satisfaction, not triumph, something quieter. The completion of a thing. The last piece of a patient chart filled in. I need you out of this apartment, I said. Janet Reeves is available Monday morning to formalize whatever needs formalizing. Her number is in the folder Deb has. You can take tonight to arrange where you're going. I stood up. I'd like you to sleep in the guest room tonight, I said. The rest we handle through Janet. He sat for a moment. Then he nodded. Once, and he went. My mother cried a little in the kitchen, quietly, with her hand over her mouth, the way women of her generation cry when they are trying not to. I held her hand. Tara washed the cups. Deb sat at the counter and ate the crackers she had brought in her bag, because Deb always brings snacks to difficult situations, which is one of the many reasons I love her. We sat in my kitchen for 2 hours. We talked about nothing important, a TV show Tara was watching, a patient story Deb told that made my mother laugh, the crackers, the terrible overhead lighting I kept meaning to replace with a lamp, ordinary things, the building blocks of a life that was mine. Marcus was gone by Sunday afternoon. He left a note on the kitchen counter, short, handwritten, the words of a man who was not without conscience, just without enough of it at the right times. I read it once, I did not keep it. Janet handled the rest. It was as she had promised, clean. I want to tell you where things are now. It has been 4 months. My father and I have spoken 3 times, short calls. Careful, like learning a new language in middle age. Possible, but requiring effort you don't need with languages you grew up speaking. I do not know what we will become. I know we are not nothing, which is more than I expected. My mother calls on Sundays. Not in crisis, just to call. It is new and slightly awkward, and I receive it with the careful optimism of someone who understands that people can change small things even when they cannot change large ones. Tara and I had coffee last week. She told me about a man she's seeing. I told her she seemed happy. She said, I think I am, with the slightly surprised expression of someone who had not expected that sentence to be true. I understood that expression. I have been wearing it myself lately. I am back on full shifts. The work that is mine, that has always been mine, that exists completely independently of any man or any family story or any midnight phone call. I am good at my job. I come home to my apartment, 12 minutes from the hospital, quiet, ordered, lit by lamps, not overhead lights because I finally changed them. Some evenings I sit at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and I think about the 2 cups my mother had waiting that night, the preparation of them, the certainty that I would come, and I feel something I am still finding the exact word for. Not anger, not forgiveness, something in between. Something that acknowledges that the people who love us imperfectly are still the people who love us. That a mother who controls, and a father who left, and a sister who waited too long are also people trying to find their way towards something better in the limited and human ways they know how. That understanding this does not mean absorbing it, that you can love someone and still require more. That learning the difference between the two is not a single moment. It is a practice. I practice it every day.